History has this really funny way of taking dynamic, flawed, and completely fascinating human beings and just turning them into these static, cold marble statues. We tend to look at our historical figures as if they were fully formed right from birth, completely erasing the messy, dangerous, and wildly uncertain paths they actually walked. Well, today we're going to completely deconstruct the gritty early years of George Washington. Long before the white wig, way before the presidency, and definitely before the legend, there was just a young man struggling to find his place in an untamed, highly volatile world. We're diving deep into this explainer to explore the formative years of a man who literally built his legacy from the ground up. We are so often presented with this incredibly powerful myth, right? The stoic father of a nation, the infallible commanding general on a horse, that unchanging face staring right back at you on the dollar bill. But listen, the reality was radically different. Young Washington, he was a struggling dreamer. He was a rough-and-tumble frontier surveyor. And perhaps most surprisingly to some folks, he was actually a highly mistake-prone soldier. The icon we know today was absolutely not perfect, and his early days were entirely defined by trial, error, and some really intense struggle. So let's get into Section 1, Beyond the Marble Myth. Okay, so in 1732, Washington was born pretty far outside the traditional halls of power. When his father died, any chance he had at a formal elite education over in England completely vanished. He definitely wasn't handed the keys to the kingdom. By the time he was just 16 years old, really think about what most 16-year-olds are doing today, he was already out working as a surveyor in the harsh, unforgiving frontier. And from there, as he hit early adulthood, he didn't just ease into some comfortable life. No, he was thrust directly into the center of a massive geopolitical struggle. Being pushed into the wild Virginia backcountry at such an incredibly young age, that environment would shape absolutely everything that came next.
Which brings us to Section 2, Education on the Frontier.
Working as a surveyor out in the wild Virginia backcountry, well, it quickly stripped away all those polite illusions of high society. This wasn't just a day job for young George to make some extra cash. This was an unconventional, incredibly rugged education. He was quite literally mapping out the topography of the very land he'd one day lead. He was forced to learn survival in freezing, harsh climates, sleeping under the stars, crossing flooded rivers. He was mastering frontier logistics, figuring out exactly how to move people and supplies across completely hostile terrain. On top of that, he was learning how to navigate diverse and super complicated cultural alliances. These weren't just abstract concepts for him. This was deeply practical knowledge. These were the exact survival and logistical skills he would desperately need decades later as a commanding general. Moving on to Section 3, the Crucible of Conflict. And this brings up a really fascinating question. What actually happens when a future legend completely fails? We're so used to thinking of Washington as this master tactician, but young Washington was absolutely not a perfect strategist from the start. Seriously, not even close. As tensions started flaring up in the wilderness, he was shoved right into the center of a geopolitical struggle that would eventually ignite a global conflict. But here's the thing, he made some critical, truly devastating strategic mistakes early on. Specifically, I'm talking about the chaotic, poorly managed skirmish at Jumonville Glen, and then his subsequent, pretty disastrous surrender at Fort Necessity. He had to face the brutal reality of warfare against seasoned forces, and, well, he completely failed. Yet those early, incredibly costly failures, they became his forge. He didn't just pack it in and quit. Instead, he tempered his leadership through that heavy failure. He learned precisely what not to do when commanding troops. Let's dive into Section 4, Ambition and Honor. Now, what defined these grueling years wasn't just his military actions on the battlefield. It was this intense personal discipline defined by a pretty staggering number, 110. Washington was utterly obsessed with the idea of honor. To maintain it, he meticulously copied down 110 rules of civility to obsessively guide his behavior in literally every single interaction. It was this incredibly strict code meant to protect his reputation and govern his actions, ensuring he kept the composure of a proper gentleman even while he was just trying to survive out in the lawless wild. So Washington was caught in this profound tension. On one side, you have his modest beginnings, but on the other, this burning, relentless ambition to climb the social ladder and set himself apart from his peers. The guy wanted to rise in status, plain and simple. And he used that strict discipline we just talked about sort of like a steering wheel, while his fierce ambition acted as the engine, moving him steadily away from those modest roots and right toward the upper echelons of society. The crazy part is, he felt the pressure of destiny long before the rest of the world even knew his name. This strict personal code, combined with his relentless drive to rise up, meant he was carrying a massive internal weight all the time. He was preparing himself for something great, holding himself to a nearly impossible standard, way before the world had any idea who George Washington even was.
Section 5. The Path to Destiny.
When you look back, every single thing he went through was a direct stepping stone to 1776. Enduring those freezing cold nights in the woods as a surveyor, that taught him profound physical endurance. Surviving heavy, devastating failures in battle, that taught him strategy, caution, and serious resilience. His relentless pursuit of status and social climbing taught him the complex politics of leadership. History books often focus super heavily on the final outcome, but the true drama, the actual groundwork for the Revolutionary War, lies right here in these specific formative trials. Ultimately, the boy who surveyed land had become a man capable of surveying the future of a continent. I just love that because it encapsulates his transformation so perfectly. He evolved from an ambitious, error-prone youth in the woods into a founding father. And that transformation wasn't just some magical overnight thing. It was defined by immense growth, deep regret from his early tactical blunders, and a relentless, unwavering pursuit of greatness. Because the truth is, legends aren't born, they are constructed. The next time you look at the face of Washington, don't just see the stoic marble myth. Try to see the years of brutal trial and error behind it. Greatness isn't some gift that's just handed out at birth. It is painstakingly built, piece by piece, failure by failure, right out there in the wild. He wasn't always a legend, he was a man who deliberately chose to become one. So let me ask you, how might your own trials, your early failures, and your errors be constructing your future? We all face our own frontiers and our own battlefields, right? Just like Washington, the mistakes you're making today could actually be the exact forge tempering your leadership for tomorrow. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and definitely keep exploring the history that